Welcome to the Yoga of Healing and Awakening Summit, a free online event where you'll discover essential depth teachings and daily practices for your mind, body, and soul. Share these visionary masters and esteemed practitioners with your friends and family, and join us on Facebook at the Shift Network. And now your host, Cyndi Lee.
Welcome, everyone. We are so glad that you're joining us today, and I'm really happy to introduce our special guest for today's session, Tari Prinster. Tari Prinster is a cancer survivor, a master yoga teacher, a celebrated author, and founder of Yoga for Cancer, also known as Y4C, which brings a specialized yoga methodology to cancer survivors worldwide. She writes and lectures on yoga and cancer and trains yoga teachers internationally, educating them on how yoga can provide immunity and lower recurrent risks. Tari, it's such a great pleasure to have you joining us today. Welcome.
Thank you, Cyndi. It's a pleasure to be here, sort of like going full circle.
Exactly. Yes, Tari and I have been friends for 20 years at least. And, I know that you have been doing this work for pretty much 20 years and really building it, and you don't seem to be stopping or slowing down at all. And I know that part of that is because you call this work your ministry. And
you were the one who pointed that out to me.
Did I?
Yes, absolutely. I heard you talk about your father's ministry. And then you made the connection as to what you observed. This really isn't teaching. This is a ministry for you. So I thank you for that, Cyndi.
Yeah, well, it is. It's a ministry for you. You're really called to this work. And so could you tell us how you got started with this?
It's kind of a funny story that I was a yogi before I was diagnosed with cancer. I'd been studying and practicing yoga a lot, and thought that I was pretty hot stuff. I was strong. I was, only a little over 50 years old, and all of a sudden, a day after I won a really big ski race here in Vermont, I got the call from my doctor, my surgeon, who said, "Hey, we looked at that little lump in your breast and it's cancer." And I thought that the world had fallen apart. That was 20 years ago. And so I panicked. And the first thing I thought was, well, I'm going to go to my mat. And I did. Mm-hmm. And then the second thing was, I'm going to go to the yoga studio and find out, what I should be doing. How did this happen? And what should I do now? And I was surprised at how little was known in the yoga world about somebody with cancer, what I should do and what I shouldn't do. So that kind of disappointed me. And of course, 20 years ago, doctors didn't even want to say the word yoga. Right. So I was kind of left as on a big ocean of ambiguity and insecurity as to what to do. And so I started studying it myself and just observing what was happening in my body when I did go to my mat, and I go to my mat every day. And then I started looking around for what I thought was going to be, I wasn't a yoga teacher. I wanted to find a program that would give me a foundation that I thought would be adaptable to then specialty schools, specialty populations. And I searched all over, and I ended up at Om Yoga. So that's how I got started, because I felt very much that the methodology that you were teaching at that time was welcoming to everyone and adaptable to everyone. Mm. And so that's why I did the teacher training at Om Yoga.
Well, I remember you very well, and that meeting that we had for people that were interested in teacher training. And there was a lot of people there, and I didn't know you. And you raised your hand and said, do you have to be able to do all the poses in order to teach them? And I said, no. And I think that and I wrote about that in your wonderful book. Do you have a copy of that you want to show right there?
Let's see. Oh, I think I do. Yes, I do. The one with all the tags in it.
That's nice. Yeah. Yoga for Cancer. And that has really come full circle as well, because you can learn to teach yoga for cancer survivors, even if you haven't had cancer. And this is part of what you have figured out of how to offer yoga for so many people. Because you've told us that, I learned this from you, that more people survive cancer than don't. And so we need more yoga teachers that can teach yoga to cancer survivors. And this is what you've been doing.
Yeah, and I think well, thank you for making that point. Yes, it's very true, because in the teacher trainings that I do, that's the question that always comes up. How am I going to find authenticity if I'm not a survivor? And that, I think, is why teachers need training, because it's not because you're a survivor that cancer patients and survivors will be coming to your classes. It's because you know what to do and what not to do. So once you're equipped with that knowledge, and as I like to say, not just compassion, but the information and the knowledge of what to do, which I did not find in the yoga community when I was diagnosed, that's the kind of authenticity one needs to have. You don't have to be a survivor to do it. So thank you for mentioning that. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. You've also said that cancer takes your breath away and yoga gives it back.
Well, that's true. Well, as I said, I was in shock and awe. I thought I had everything, perfectly planned, that this wouldn't happen. And it's the same phenomenon I've noticed when I say this to others, when you hear the first time you hear those three little words, you have cancer, you stop breathing. I mean, you really do. You stop breathing. No, this couldn't be happening to me. And then not only do you learn how to breathe again as you begin to go through your treatments and recovery, but what the methodology, the Yoga for the Y4C methodology teaches us is how that breath is healing. What is happening when you actually breathe, how that reinforces the lymphatic system and the whole immune system in the body. It's not just something that makes us feel good and brings our mind and body together, the union we try to create in yoga, but it really, on a cellular level, has an impact. And we can use that then to really lower the possibility of a recurrence if you are a survivor, and also with knowledge of that, how you can keep your immune system stronger too. There's a very definite connection between the breath and the immune system. So
can you talk about that connection a little bit more?
Well, it gets kind of deep into the muscles and into the lymphatic system. Quite honestly, is that our lymph system is our garbage disposal, and it, unlike the cardiovascular system, does not have a muscle to help it function properly. So it depends upon body movement. It depends upon yoga inversions. And it depends upon, if we go really deep into it, the diaphragm moving, engaging and relaxing. That diaphragm is actually irrigating the lymphatic canals in the body, very deep inside next to the spine, right next to the diaphragm. So when we're doing deep diaphragmatic breathing, we are actually pumping, being the heart muscle for the lymph system, which is, on a cellular level, very, very important. the immune system needs the lymphatic system to be working and functioning well in order for there to be a balance in the immune system, because it's not a system on its own. The immune system is all these systems working together well. And so that's why the breath is a definite connection to the cardiovascular system, which brings us oxygen, but also to the lymph system, which keeps us irrigated, keeps the carburetor going.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that's so interesting to me about the methodology that you've evolved is the sequencing of a class. You had the base of taking training from me, but then you had to reshape the sequencing, the arc of a class, because I think the first thing you do is to move the lymph in different ways. And can you talk about how you start a class and how that's different than a regular yoga class?
Well, it's maybe maybe not so different. I mean, it really isn't different from your classes, because I stole the warm-up arm vinyasa, because that's something that is accessible, that everybody can do, whether you're in a hospital bed, in a infusion chair, or in a yoga class. That, and it demonstrates how important the spine is, and how important the breath is to keeping the spine upright and firm, so that you can breathe, so that you can work that diaphragm. Because sometimes we lose the ability to breathe, especially when you are ill. You lose the ability to breathe. So we talk about that in the beginning, and that's what I usually do start with, is the importance of keeping the spine healthy, you know, being upright, or even upright when you're lying in a bed. I mean, keeping the spine in a position of not being obstructed, so that you can breathe well. And
you said, that was very interesting to me, you said people that were even in a chair or a bed, or when they're ill. Do you work with people in, one-on-one in hospitals and in their bed?
I have worked one-on-one, not one-on-one so much in a hospital, but yes, I have. In my trained teachers work both one-on-one and have classes. And most of my work has been done in classroom settings. Classrooms that are in hospitals, in clinics, or in yoga studios. So it spreads all over. And yes, I mean, that is, it's not unusual to have someone not able to get out of a chair to do yoga in a chair. And everything about what we do in the methodology is adaptable to it being done in a chair or on a mat. And I kind of like that too, when there are people on the mat and in a chair. It's really challenging to a yoga teacher, but it's workable and it's possible. And it is so inspiring to those who are coming for the kind of help that they're looking for. I mean, we hear all about yoga. Yoga's healing. Yoga is so many things. But what I worry about is that in hearing that, a cancer patient or a survivor will, they're vulnerable to, they want to help themselves. They want to be their own agents. They want to protect themselves. They don't want a recurrence, and they'll go to just any kind of yoga class because we don't put it out there in the yoga world. What is good yoga and what's yoga that might be harmful for someone who is vulnerable? So that's where I'm working really hard to step into a position of yoga for cancer being something that is recognized by the medical industry and accepted. But also what I am just overwhelmed by in the time that I started doing trainings at Om Yoga to where I am now, doing trainings online, doing them in studios all over the world, that the classes are always, my teaching classes, my training classes are always full,
Right.
because people are realizing that, you know, they need to know something more, and they want to do no harm.
Yes.
They embrace that about yoga, but they also are not knowledgeable of what to do and what not to do. So that's very gratifying to me, to see how interested yoga teachers are to learn more, to go further.
Yeah. And taking it seriously, you know.
Absolutely.
I remember, I mean, you have put so much into this, and so much intelligence and so much research. I know that you have certain ways of working with people that are going through chemotherapy because of the particular side effects of chemotherapy. I wondered if you could talk about that a little bit.
Well, it's not the cancer that's the problem. It's the treatments and their side effects that really causes survivors to both suffer, both short-term and long-term. I mean, losing your hair is nothing to be afraid of. I mean, yeah, it doesn't always come back so nice, but you know, you're not going to die from loss of hair. And that there are so many other side effects that people are not usually aware of that come from cancer treatments that are lifelong. And so that is how I have designed the program, to inform teachers of what these side effects are, so that they can design the yoga to address them. For example, lymphedema is a condition that is lifelong once it is onset. And it's not the cancer that causes lymphedema. Cancer doesn't cause lymphedema. It's the removal of lymph nodes. It's the obstruction of the lymph system that brings on lymphedema, which can be extraordinarily disabling and very, very painful. So we have many things in yoga that are really beneficial to it. And the wonderful thing that we are learning since I started doing all of this is that there is a lot of research now. It didn't exist 20 years ago when I was going through this, but now we have research, hospitals who are interested in studying these problems and have measured the effectiveness of using yoga to manage various side effects, such as lymphedema. And it's very heartening to me to see that this is happening, and that it's the evidence is so well grounded. It's really good research. I've also written a white paper that looks at each one of these side effects, like the side effect of bone loss due to chemotherapy. And people who have bone loss are diagnosed as having osteoporosis because of their bone loss. And so a recent research that was done, a study that took breast cancer survivors who were clearly diagnosed with osteoporosis, and they put them into a study where they were given 10 poses, 12 poses that they were to do for 12 minutes every day for 2 years. And at the end of 2 years, and of course they had a study group who also had breast cancer and osteoporosis. At the end of that 2 years, those that did yoga compared to those who did nothing, many of those who had osteoporosis were re-diagnosed as to osteopenia. So their osteo level was reduced to osteopenia. And then they took a handful of 740, which is a big number to study, and looked at them over a 10-year period.
Oh, wow.
Doing the same thing. And some of them actually totally reversed their bone density status.
Amazing.
Yoga.
Yeah.
it works. And this is what gives me great confidence, is to see that now there is research, there is solid evidence. It's not just a theory anymore.
Yeah.
It really does work.
But it's so brilliant, I think, Tari, that you're looking at the specific side effects in addition to cancer, and what are these debilitating aspects, and to work with them. I remember you have different ways of having people work with balance, because they can be dizzy as a side effect, or have difficulty with balance, and then the strengthening exercises for the osteoporosis and lymphedema and all of these things. And you're teaching people to do what you do, which is to have a lot of people in your class, and each one has a different story.
Each one has a different story, and all of those stories helped feed me in terms of what I need. Because they still do come with their side effects, which I didn't experience some of them myself. And so it's not like I have to know how to do every pose. I don't have to know every side effect in order to understand the kinds of things that yoga can bring to those circumstances. Another important side effect, which we don't hear about as much if you are not a non-survivor, is something called neuropathy, which is one of the reasons for teaching the balancing poses. But also, how do you teach standing poses to someone who has neuropathy in their feet, and which means that they can either not feel them at all? How do they find their balance? How do they, develop for the kind of proprioception that they need to be safe, to not fall and break that hip because they also have osteoporosis? Yeah, we got a lot of work to do, and it's being done. And and you did bring up the one point, Cyndi, which I want to go back to just a little bit, because I think that this is something that yoga teachers need to be aware of, is that as much as we think of cancer, the first thought is death. It's the numbers of mortality rates across all cancers are going down.
Good.
And the other rate that is going up is those who are surviving cancer. And that's thanks to the medical professions, who are coming up with all of these new and wonderful treatments. But when you have those two lines going in opposite directions, what do you have? You have an increasing population of survivors, which means that translates into many people who survive cancer are going to be in every yoga class. So every yoga teacher is going to have somebody in their class, 1 out of 2 men and 1 out of 3 women over a lifetime. So that means, in any yoga class, you're going to have a good number of people that are already experiencing cancer.
Yeah, that's such a good point too, because I think that there are reasons why some people would not want to go to a class called Yoga for Cancer Survivors. They don't want to say that to themselves, or they don't want to be with other people, they're not ready to be with other people that are cancer survivors, or they like the teacher that they went to before and they want to keep going to that class. And for all these reasons, everybody should take your training. I'm going to plug it for you.
That teacher who they liked before should take it, so that they know, the cautions to have. Absolutely.
Yeah, because we've all been yoga teachers, and where somebody says, "Oh, I have this situation or that situation, and you've been my teacher, and I want you to keep being my teacher." And we have to say, I am not qualified to teach that aspect of yoga. So I think just as much as learning prenatal yoga, we need to learn how to teach cancer survivors. And
that doesn't mean that you stay in the prenatal ladies don't stay in the prenatal classes. They go on to regular classes. Yeah. And that was what I love so much about when we were teaching yoga for cancer at Own Studio.
Yeah.
Is so I always said that, look, I want to see you go to that class down the hall. That's just a regular vinyasa class.
Yeah.
That's where we want you to feel safe and able to, manage your symptoms in those kind of classes.
Yeah.
How are we going to deal with the neuropathy and the lymphedema? Here, we teach you how to manage that, and then you can go there and know how to deal with it too.
Right. They know how to work with their own body.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think that did happen for sure. Many times. But there was also your class. I mean, if you call it a ministry, I hesitate a little bit to say this, but it was almost like church. It was so meaningful, and it was so nourishing for people. And there was a sangha, there was a community there where probably there were some people that could go to another class and maybe did, but would also go to that class, because there's another kind of healing that was happening there, and it had a lot to do with your vibe and your caring and your setting up that kind of environment in the class.
Well, there's another side effect of cancer, not necessarily cancer treatments, but cancer in general, which is the side effect that is probably the least known, is that it's lonely.
Yeah.
Cancer can be very, very lonely. And that phenomenon, exactly what happened when these survivors would come to class and they would make connections and realize that they were not the only one going through that.
Yeah.
And there's healing in that community, in knowing somebody else has been along that path, somebody else is going to give you a hand along that path. So that was definitely what was happening in the sangha of the classes.
Yeah. And that is so deep, because I mean, as you know, I haven't had cancer, but I had these 2 surgeries last year on my hip replacements. And I think it's a very similar deal. Is you have a doctor, and the doctors tell you what they tell you. And they are very narrow in the zone of what they tell you. They're not going to tell you anything that they could get in trouble for, or that isn't completely up their specialty. And so you're on your own trying to figure out your experience, which is so deep and so profound and so kind of identity shattering, and so many layers. And all you need is a couple of other people that are one step ahead of you on the same path, and you're not alone anymore, and you're not scared in the same way.
And then too, when you are a couple steps along the path yourself, reaching back, when you recognize that other person who was deer in the headlight, that's kind of look and feel, that it creates that fiber of what's happened, what happened in those, and continues to happen.
Yeah. And I think the other thing I remember that you do is when you have a new person come to class, you spend some time with them, and you have something for them to fill out. And, it's not just like they come in like a regular class, and then, in the cracks you say, like, tell me your cancer story. Everybody in there before you start the class. And that really makes people feel safe and seen too.
Right. And largely that came out of my doing something that is, I took out of an Om yoga class, and I edited it out as making the statement in the beginning of class. So how's everybody today? What's going on with you today? I never do that. And I suggest to my teachers that they don't do that, because it's so, people are so likely to dump their whole story, and that is not what they came for. Many of the students who would come to that Om yoga class were from a support group at the hospital next door. And they came to yoga instead of going to the support group, because they got so sick and tired of listening to everybody's story.
Yeah.
And in fact, Cyndi, if you'll let me just bring up another research that measured a control group that was all breast cancer survivors, and they did yoga 90 minutes a day.
Mm.
And the control group was breast cancer survivors who were assigned individual therapists. So they did 90 minutes a week of talk therapy. 8 weeks, okay? What they measured in this was the level of anxiety and the level of depression, and the yoga group, all of them plummeted in their self-accounting of their depression. And the individualized counseling, not so much so. So it was self-reporting on these areas of depression and anxiety. And there's another one. Yoga did it again.
That is fascinating. That
we
just
love
hearing that cheers me up. So what do you think, Tari? There's these studies that are being done. So we are starting to see an awareness, at least in the yoga community, and maybe in the medical community, that yoga isn't just a spiritual thing, but is, can be scientifically proven to reduce recurrence rates and to lower cancer risks. But do you think that, how much of the healthcare, system is really saying yoga should be part of our cancer care continuum? Is it happening?
That's the challenge for me. That's the overall big nut to crack. And I think it is happening. Certainly what I've seen in 20 years is a lot. There are those who participate in research. Many doctors and many hospitals who do. There are many hospitals that have their integrative services. And we've stopped calling it alternative. Thank goodness, because that was the real obstacle, the real stone to stumble on, is that it was being called yoga as well as acupuncture and Tai Chi and some of the other healing modalities were being presented as alternative. And the medical profession saw that as our preaching that it was an alternative to Western medicine.
Oh.
That's why they kind of shut their doors on it. We're not offering this as an alternative. We're offering it as complementary or as integrated, to integrate it in. And that's my goal, is to see yoga integrated into the overall prescription, into the overall treatment plan, so that you get prescribed, this kind of therapy, maybe radiation, maybe hormone therapy. Certainly they're going to be advised to do certain kinds of supplements, but that the doctor also writes a prescription. Take yoga, take a yoga for cancer class, and reduce your anxiety, build your bones, manage your lymphedema. So that's my hope. And it is happening. I did a presentation last week in California at the Grand Rounds at a Pasadena hospital.
Wow.
With 60 oncologists. And they were paying attention. And you'll love this. I made it not just PowerPoint and lecture. I had them stand up and do a little standing warm-up vinyasa.
Good.
They all did it, and it was really exciting and wonderful. But I think that they are, it's beginning, they were interested. Mm-hmm. Two oncologists came up to me afterwards and said, how do I become a yoga teacher?
Wow.
So I do think that it is happening. What will make it happen and seal it will be when insurance companies recognize that yoga teachers can be certified and that they are also professionals and they need to be paid. That when doctors are referring and making the recommendation, then insurance companies will see that as, a revenue stream for everybody.
Right.
And that's what we need to see happen.
Well, it seems like you're getting closer. You're getting closer every day. That's very exciting about that grand rounds in Pasadena. That's amazing. And I just wanted to say that it's such, it's so positive that the mortality rate is going down, but some people do still die from cancer. And my friend died last week, but she told me all through her, last time of life, that she was so grateful that she had taken yoga, because she was scared. And, sometimes she got scared and she could do her breathing. And it reduced her anxiety, it reduced her depression. It's just good for the whole thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
it's a tool to being your own agent. And, I would say those students that I have seen who are stage 4 and are really, really ill, are probably the ones that understand most the impermanence that we talk about in yoga, and have found yoga to be that tool to make peace with it. Some of us struggle even, even healthy to find that peace, and,
yeah.
So that's absolutely. Well, I'm sorry for your loss. And certainly we're not painting any picture that people do not die from yoga. I mean, not that we die for yoga, die from cancer. That's true. It is, it's a disease that can take lives, just as, cardiovascular disease can take lives, right. And many other diseases that can take a life.
But this work that you're doing is helpful in all cases, more than helpful. It's, I mean, I've seen it at the studio, and I'm just really, like, I don't want to say I'm proud of you, because then I feel like I'm your mom, but I'm really proud of you for developing this work and sticking with it, and spreading it to so many people, and really just being very much a real yogi yourself, and a bodhisattva, and just helping so many people in a very clear and generous way. And
well, thank you, Cyndi.
We're going to keep going.
You're very, very supportive to get this help, guide me and give me the opportunity to use the studio to launch it all. And so I'm eternally grateful to you. Wow. Everyone's grateful. You're part of the fiber for sure.
Yeah, well, it was a wonderful opportunity for all of us. And so if anybody that's listening would like to check out Tari's work more, you can go to www.y4c.com. And thank you again, Tari. This has been so inspiring.
Thank you, Cyndi, giving me this opportunity to reconnect with you and to go down that memory lane, but also hopefully to encourage others. I hope I've inspired someone to join me in making these waves of health and healing for the cancer world.
Yes, I'm sure you have. Thank you.
Thank you for joining the Yoga of Healing and Awakening Summit, brought to you by the Shift Network. To learn more, visit yogaofhealingsummit.com. To learn more about our global programs and events, visit theshiftnetwork.com. Thank you again for joining us and for sharing this powerful journey of yoga as a divine life path.